Okay, so we've been digging into this idea, you know, could the 2024 election, could it actually end in a tie between Trump and Harris?
Huh. A tie.
Yeah, like a real nail biter.
Yeah.
We all know the usual election night stuff, but a tie. That's something else.
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
Exactly. So we're going to really dive into what makes that so unlikely.
Okay.
But, and here's the thing, even thinking about it, even if it's a long shot, it shows us how U.S. elections actually work, behind the scenes.
You're right. Right.
So to help us with this whole thing, I've got our expert here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a fun one to think about because it makes you go beyond just like who gets the most votes.
Yeah, it's not just a popularity contest, right?
Exactly. And the stuff you sent over, it actually uses the Electoral College as an example, right? So like even if, say, Trump and Harris, they tie in the popular vote.
Which is crazy to think about already.
I know, right? But even then, the electoral votes, how they're spread out, it makes a tie really hard to get.
Because it's not about winning big overall. It's about getting to that magic number.
270, you got it.
And that's where those battleground states, the ones I was looking at, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah, those are the ones they can completely flip the script because their electoral votes are so important.
So someone could win the popular vote, but if the other person gets those key states...
Game over. They'd be president.
Wild, right?
Yeah.
So the Electoral College, it's like, it forces you to think strategically.
Totally. You got to win the right states, not just the most people overall.
Like a giant game of Risk, right? Got to conquer those territories.
Love that analogy.
But okay, it's not just lines on a map, right? We got actual voters, real people, and Trump and Harris, they appeal to different groups, right? So that's going to play into how likely a tie is.
Oh, for sure. This isn't just numbers in a spreadsheet, right? You got Trump's base. They tend to be white, working class, more rural areas.
In Harris, you usually see younger voters, city folks, people of color.
Right. And historically, those groups, they don't vote at the same rates. So even if, and this is a big if, you had the same number of people saying they were for Trump or Harris.
Hypothetically.
Right. Hypothetically, the actual turnout, it wouldn't be perfectly balanced.
Like ingredients in a recipe, even if you got it all, too much salt ruins it.
Perfect way to put it. And you know what else can throw things off? Third-party candidates. Those are wild cards.
Right. It's not always just two choices.
Nope. And you brought up 2016, good example. Jill Stein, Green Party, Gary Johnson, Libertarian.
They got people talking.
And they got votes. Even if they didn't win, they took votes from the main too.
So it's like, don't just convince them to vote for you. Convince them to vote against the other guy.
Which sometimes means a third-party vote, right? Like, hey, I'm not happy with either of you.
Exactly. Makes things hard to predict, especially in a close race.
Oh, for sure. If it's close, those third-party votes, even a small amount, can totally change things.
Like some crazy political math problem adds a whole other level of difficulty.
Makes a tie even less likely.
Right.
But way more interesting to think about.
Absolutely.
It really is fascinating.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that can throw things off, we got to talk about turnout, right? How many people actually vote?
Oh, that's huge, right? You can have people saying they're with you, but will they show up on the day?
Exactly. And, your research, it had this interesting point about it. Historically, more people voting, that's usually good for Democrats.
Huh.
But lower turnout, fewer people showing up, that often helps Republicans.
That's wild. So campaigns, they've got to think about that too. It's like not just persuading the undecided, but getting your own people to the polls.
100%. And your research even had these examples for Trump and Harris and how they might handle it, right? Imagine Harris, she's all over social media, those TikTok campaigns, getting young people fired up.
It's like that saying, but modernized, right? Meet voters where their memes are or something.
That's it. Got to speak their language. And then you got Trump. He might go big rallies, more old school outreach, stuff that works for older folks.
So you got these two totally different playbooks, both trying to affect turnout, which again makes a tie even less likely.
Like two pendulums swinging, different speeds. The chances they line up perfectly. Slim to none.
Love the analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how the Electoral College, demographics, third-party candidates, and voter turnout all make a tie unlikely. But for a moment, let's just say, what if, by some miracle, it happens? Tie. What then? Do we all just shrug and try again in 4 years?
Not quite. That's where the Constitution, it's like it's got this emergency plan, for those break the glass moments.
And the research you shared, it dug into this, talked about the 12th Amendment. Gotta admit, haven't thought about that since high school.
Yeah, not exactly light reading, but super relevant here. So, 12th Amendment, it says if no one gets enough electoral votes, the House of Representatives, they decide.
Okay, so instead of us regular folks voting, it's a smaller group, the House.
Right. But here's the kicker. Each state's group in the House, they only get one vote, no matter how many representatives that state has.
Hold up, so a huge state like California, tons of people, same say as, say, Wyoming, with way fewer people.
Exactly. It's meant to balance things out, big states versus smaller ones, you know?
So someone could win the popular vote by a mile, but lose because of how the House votes.
Could happen, yeah. Shows you how the U.S. system, it can be complicated, even kind of backwards.
Totally. But it gets even more wild, right? Because the Senate, they get involved if the VP's tied up, too.
Oh, yeah, we could have a president and VP from different parties. Imagine those staff meetings.
Talk about awkward. But seriously, would that be, like, a good thing? Different voices being heard? Or a sign that the system's broken if no one agrees?
That's the million-dollar question, right? People would debate that forever. It's that balance every democracy struggles with. How do you listen to most people but still protect those in the minority?
Like walking a tightrope. Got to find that sweet spot.
Perfectly said. And the fact there's no easy answer, it's always changing, that's what's exciting, even if it's frustrating sometimes. But that's democracy, I guess.
Makes you think, for sure.
Yeah.
It really does make you think about the whole system,
Yeah.
you know? And it makes you realize that it's not just about winning or losing. It's about, like, does it actually represent what people want? And can we switch leaders peacefully, even if it's a weird outcome?
Right. The system itself has to work no matter who wins.
Well said. Okay, before we wrap this whole thing up, there's one more thing from the research.
Yeah.
You asked, what if the electoral vote IS tied, but then the House, they can't agree on who's president? Talk about a curveball.
Right. That's how deep this rabbit hole goes. So say the House is stuck, can't decide by Inauguration Day. Well, the 20th Amendment, it kicks in.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
It does. And guess who gets to be acting president? It's all spelled out, no guesswork.
Don't tell me it's like drawing straws or something.
No. The line of succession, it says the vice president-elect, they're in. But here's the thing. We're talking about a tie, right? So there might not be a clear vice president either if the Senate's also stuck.
So the presidency is like a hot potato, but the most important one ever.
Exactly. It's wild, right? These little details in the Constitution, they matter so much. We focus on the election, but it's these edge cases that really show if the system can handle it.
Like when they test airplanes.
Yeah.
Right, push it to the limit to make sure it won't break.
Exactly. A tied election, Congress can't agree, it sounds like a movie, but hey, the system is made for this, even if it never happens.
So, to whoever sent us this question, thank you. We went deep on U.S. elections today, and it reminds us, even a system this old, there's always something new to learn.
For sure. Democracy's a work in progress, not a finished thing. Got to keep an eye on it, be involved, and ask the tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, next time you're watching election night and you think you've got it all figured out, remember this conversation. There's always more to the story, always another layer, and who knows, maybe even a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride.